It was a calm afternoon at the open-air market. The kind of afternoon where nothing feels dangerous. Sunlight poured softly between the buildings. Vendors called out friendly prices. A street musician played a slow, peaceful melody near the fountain. Families walked past fruit stands, children holding balloons, couples laughing quietly. Everything felt ordinary, safe, unremarkable. Near a small tea stall stood an older man in a simple jacket. No designer clothes, no security, no one giving him a second look. He wasn't trying to be noticed. He just stood there calmly, observing the world the way someone does when they've already seen too much of it. His posture was relaxed, but balanced, his expression neutral, but aware. If you didn't know who he was, you'd think he was just another retired man enjoying the afternoon. And maybe that's exactly what he wanted. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in a crowd is the one who looks like he doesn't belong in a fight at all. Across the walkway, a loud voice suddenly cut through the music. Sharp. Aggressive. Out of place. A tall man pushed through the crowd with irritation written all over his face. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't relaxed. He looked like someone searching for a reason to explode. People instinctively stepped aside. But the older man didn't move fast enough. And in the next few seconds, a simple shoulder bump was about to turn this peaceful afternoon into something no one there would ever forget. Because one arrogant man was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The impact wasn't dramatic, just a shoulder, just a step off balance. But the reaction, that's where everything changed. The tall man spun around immediately. "Watch where you're going, old man!" His voice was loud enough to slice through the music and chatter. Conversations nearby paused. A few heads turned. The older man steadied himself and adjusted his jacket calmly. "I apologize," he said, voice even. No sarcasm. No fear, just composure. That should have ended it. In normal situations it would have. But this wasn't about a bump. It was about ego. The tall man took a step closer, invading personal space. "You think you can just walk into people and mumble sorry?" The older man didn't step back. He didn't step forward either. He simply stood balanced, feet planted naturally, hands relaxed by his sides. A vendor behind them whispered, "Let it go." But the aggressor wasn't interested in letting anything go. He was enjoying this, enjoying the attention. "You people think you own the place," the man continued, louder now, "walking around like you matter." The older man studied him quietly. Not angrily, not challengingly, just observantly. That calm gaze irritated the bully even more. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he snapped. "I'm not," the older man replied softly. "I'm listening." A few people nearby exchanged glances. Something about the exchange felt strange. Usually when someone gets yelled at like that, they shrink, they look down, they try to escape. This man didn't. He wasn't defiant. But he wasn't intimidated either. The aggressor gave him a small shove with 2 fingers against his chest. Not hard. Just enough to test him. "You think you're tough?" Silence. The older man's breathing didn't change. "I don't want trouble," he said. The bully smirked. "You already got it." Phones were slowly lifting now. People sensed the tension building. A mother quietly pulled her child a few steps back. The musician stopped playing. The market noise dulled into background static. The tall man circled slightly, trying to size him up, and for the first time, he seemed confused. Because the older man wasn't reacting like a victim. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't pleading. He was simply present, calm in a way that didn't make sense. "You're real brave for someone your age," the aggressor mocked. "No," the older man replied gently. "I'm just patient." That line landed heavier than it sounded. The bully's smile faded slightly. Patience. What did that even mean? Was he stalling? Was he afraid? Or was he waiting? The aggressor leaned in closer, lowering his voice now. "You should have just walked away." The older man finally met his eyes fully. "I still can." There it was again. That strange composure. Not submission, not challenge, control. And that's what began shifting the energy of the crowd. Because confidence that loud is common. But confidence that quiet, that's unsettling. The tall man felt it too. And instead of stepping back, he doubled down. He shoved him harder this time. A few gasps broke through the crowd. The older man moved back half a step, smoothly, balanced, controlled. Adjusting, almost like the shove had been measured and absorbed. The bully frowned. "You think this is funny?" "No." "Then what is it?" The older man paused before answering. A mistake. The words weren't threatening. They were factual. And for a split second, something flickered across the aggressor's face. Doubt, but pride crushed it instantly. He looked around, noticing the phones pointed in their direction. He couldn't back down now. Not with an audience. He needed dominance. He needed to win. So he raised his voice again. "You want to show everyone how tough you are." The older man shook his head slowly. "I don't need to." And that response, calm, controlled, almost indifferent, felt more humiliating than any insult. The bully clenched his jaw. His ego was slipping. His authority in the moment was fading. And he couldn't understand why, because the man standing in front of him looked ordinary. Older. Unremarkable. But there was something in the way he held himself. Something disciplined. Something trained. The crowd felt it now. That shift in momentum. The aggressor stepped even closer. Close enough that their shoulders nearly touched again. "You're about to regret this." The older man exhaled slowly. "No," he said. "You are." And that was the moment the tension snapped tighter than it ever had. Because now it wasn't just a loud man harassing someone weaker. Now it felt like something else. Something the aggressor still hadn't realized. And in the next few seconds, he was going to push it too far. The space between them felt smaller now. Too small. The tall man's breathing grew heavier, sharper. His pride had taken control, and pride doesn't retreat in front of an audience. "You think you're smarter than me," he sneered. The older man didn't answer. That silence hit harder than any insult could have. The crowd sensed it. There's something unsettling about a person who doesn't react when they're supposed to. Most people argue back, defend themselves, raise their voice, but this man, he just stood there, balanced, aware, unmoved, and the bully hated that. "You're embarrassing yourself," someone muttered from the crowd. That was gasoline on fire. The tall man turned slightly. "Mind your business." But he couldn't ignore it now. Eyes were on him. Phones were recording. And instead of looking powerful, he was starting to look desperate. He stepped forward again, chest out. "Say something," he demanded. The older man finally spoke, voice steady. "I already did." The simplicity of that answer made the bully's jaw tighten. He shoved him again, harder this time. A collective gasp rippled through the market. The older man's body shifted smoothly with the force, like water adjusting to a stone. He didn't fall. He didn't stumble. He absorbed it, and returned to neutral. That was the moment whispers started spreading. "That's not normal." He didn't even flinch. "Who is that guy?" The aggressor heard the murmurs. His ears burned. He wasn't just fighting the man anymore, he was fighting the crowd's perception. And he was losing. "You think you're better than me?" he barked. "No." The older man replied softly. "I think you're angry." That struck a nerve, a deep one. The bully's face flushed red. "You don't know me?" "You're right," the older man said calmly. "But I know this behavior." That line changed the energy completely. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't reactive. It sounded experienced, like someone who had seen this pattern before, many times. The aggressor laughed, but it sounded forced. "Oh, what? You're some kind of philosopher now?" "No." A pause. "I'm someone who doesn't enjoy hurting people." The words were quiet, but they carried weight. And for a split second, just a split second, hesitation flickered in the bully's eyes. Then ego crushed it again. He stepped closer, invading every inch of space. "You couldn't hurt me if you tried." The older man looked at him steadily. "I'm trying not to." That line sent a visible shiver through the crowd, because now it didn't feel like bluffing. It felt like restraint. The tall man's pride couldn't tolerate that implication. He grabbed the older man's jacket collar. Hard. Fabric tightened. A woman in the crowd covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "He's going too far." The older man's hands remained relaxed at his sides. He didn't grab back, didn't panic, didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at the hand gripping him, then back into the aggressor's eyes. "This is your last chance," he said quietly. The bully laughed directly in his face. Or what? Silence. Not dramatic silence, controlled silence. The kind that feels deliberate. The older man gently removed the man's hand from his collar, not forcefully, not violently, just precisely. The movement was small, but efficient. The bully blinked. He hadn't expected that. He stepped back half a step instinctively, then quickly corrected himself, pretending it didn't affect him. "You think that scares me?" The older man shook his head. "No." More whispers. More tension. The crowd felt it building toward something irreversible. The aggressor swung his arm outward aggressively. Not a punch yet, just intimidation. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood." "You're not," the older man replied. That response almost broke the bully's composure entirely. "Say that again." "You're not in a good mood," he repeated evenly. "You're looking for someone weaker." That was it. That was the line that snapped whatever thread of restraint remained. The tall man's face hardened. His shoulders squared, and without thinking, he shoved the older man with both hands, harder than before. This time the force was undeniable. Gasps turned into sharp cries. The musician dropped his instrument. The older man stepped back 2 paces, controlled, balanced, calculating distance. And when he looked up again, something had changed. Not anger, not rage, but permission. The bully didn't see it, but the crowd did. That subtle shift, from patience to decision. You should have walked away, the aggressor spat. The older man's voice was steady. I gave you every chance. The bully raised his hand, not a fake move, not intimidation. A real strike, and in that frozen second, as his arm began to come down, the entire market held its breath, because the line had officially been crossed, and there was no going back now. The hand came down fast, too fast for most people to react, but not for him. Before the strike could land clean, the older man moved, not wildly, not emotionally, precisely. His body shifted half an inch to the side. His hand rose just enough to redirect the force. The bully's momentum carried forward, but the target was no longer there. Instead of impact, there was imbalance. The aggressor stumbled one step past him. Confusion flashed across his face. He hadn't expected to miss. He turned instantly, angrier now, embarrassed. You think this is a joke? The crowd was completely silent. No music, no chatter. Just the sound of shoes scraping pavement. The older man's stance had changed slightly. Subtle, but different. His weight distributed evenly. His shoulders relaxed but ready. Not a fighter's flashy pose, a practitioner's position. The bully lunged again, this time not a slap, not a shove. A full swing, wide, emotional, fueled by pride. And that's when it happened. The older man stepped inside the strike. One hand guided the attacking arm past its target. The other controlled the elbow, a pivot, a shift of hips. And suddenly, the aggressor's own force betrayed him. His body rotated off balance. His knees buckled. And in less than a second, he was face down against the pavement. Not slammed violently, placed there, controlled, neutralized. A sharp gasp echoed across the market. Phones tilted to capture the aftermath. The bully tried to push up, but he couldn't. His wrist was locked. Not painfully twisted, just immobilized with surgical precision. The older man didn't kneel on him, didn't strike him, didn't shout. He simply held the position long enough to make a point. You're stronger than this, he said quietly. The words stunned the crowd more than the takedown. Because there was no anger in them, no mockery. Just truth. The aggressor grunted, struggling, but every attempt to move only tightened his own trap. You're hurting yourself, the older man added calmly. The bully froze, not because of pain. Because he realized something terrifying. The man controlling him wasn't breathing hard, wasn't strained, wasn't even fully engaged. He was comfortable. The realization hit like ice water. This wasn't luck. This wasn't an accident. This was skill, years of it. The older man slowly released pressure, then stepped back, giving him space, an opportunity to get up. The bully rolled over, scrambling to his feet, humiliated. His pride screamed at him to attack again. But something deeper whispered caution. The crowd could see it now. The shift, the doubt. Who is that guy? Someone whispered again. The older man adjusted his jacket calmly, as if he had just finished a minor inconvenience. You don't have to continue, he said. That line felt heavier than any threat. The aggressor's fists clenched. He looked around at the phones recording him, at the eyes judging him. His dominance was gone, replaced by exposure. He charged one last time. Desperate, predictable, and this time, the older man didn't just redirect, he ended it. A clean step to the side, a controlled grip, a downward spiral of momentum. The aggressor's body rotated mid-air slightly, and landed flat on his back, air forced from his lungs. A stunned silence swallowed the market whole, no cheering, no applause, just shock. The older man stood over him, not menacingly, not triumphantly, simply present. You confuse loudness with strength, he said. The bully tried to sit up again, slower now, cautious. And that's when someone in the crowd finally said it clearly. Wait, that's Steven Seagal. Heads turned, recognition spread, whispers multiplied. Is it really him? No way. But look at the movement. The bully's eyes widened slightly, because now pieces were connecting. The composure, the precision, the effortless control. The older man looked down at him one last time. I didn't want this. Then he stepped back fully, creating distance, ending the confrontation without another move. Security from nearby shops began rushing toward them. But the fight was already over. Not because someone was unconscious, not because someone was broken, but because ego had finally met discipline, and discipline had won. The bully stayed on the ground for a few seconds longer than necessary. Not injured, just shaken. His entire narrative of power had collapsed in under 30 seconds. And standing a few feet away, calm as ever, was a man who never raised his voice, never insulted him, never showed anger, only control. The market slowly began breathing again, but the atmosphere would never return to what it was before, because everyone there had just witnessed something rare, real power, and they would talk about it for years. The market didn't erupt, it didn't cheer, it didn't clap, it stayed silent, because what everyone had just seen didn't feel like a fight, it felt like a lesson. The tall man slowly pushed himself up from the pavement, not injured, not broken, but shaken in a way he didn't understand. His breathing was uneven now, not from pain, from confusion. He looked at the older man differently this time, not as prey, not as an easy target, but as a question he didn't know how to answer. How? He muttered under his breath. The older man adjusted his sleeve calmly. You were off balance, he said simply. That's it. That answer somehow felt worse than an insult. Years of pride, years of thinking size meant dominance. And he had been dismantled with balance. The crowd began whispering louder now. That movement, that was Aikido. I've seen that before. Is that really who I think it is? Phone zoomed in. The bully noticed. His humiliation was now permanent. Recorded, documented, unavoidable. You set me up, he snapped weakly. The older man shook his head. No. You attacked me. The simplicity of that truth left no room to argue. The aggressor's fists clenched again, but this time there was hesitation. He replayed the moment in his head. Every strike had been redirected. Every shove had been absorbed. Every escalation had been met with restraint, not aggression, restraint. And that realization began sinking deeper than any physical impact. You think you're some kind of hero, the bully tried. The older man's expression didn't change. I think you're frustrated. That word hit harder than anything else. Frustrated. Not powerful, not dominant, not dangerous, just frustrated. The bully's shoulders dropped slightly, a subtle crack in his posture. The older man stepped back another pace, giving him space. I told you to stop, he said calmly, more than once. The aggressor looked around at the faces watching him. They weren't afraid of him anymore. They were studying him, judging him, and worsey, they were respecting the other man. That shift in social power was unbearable. Who are you? The bully finally demanded. The older man didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the crowd instead. People were whispering more confidently now. It's him. Look at his face. I knew it. One teenager near the front spoke louder than the rest. That's Steven Seagal. The name traveled like electricity. From one mouth to another, faster each time. Steven Seagal. No way. Seriously. The bully froze, his eyes flicked back to the older man's face. He looked again. Closer. The features, the calm stare, the unmistakable presence. Recognition slowly drained the last bit of arrogance from his expression. He started. The older man didn't confirm it. Didn't deny it. He simply held eye contact, and that silence confirmed everything. The bully swallowed. Because suddenly, the story in his head had changed. He hadn't tried to intimidate a random old man. He had tried to dominate a martial arts master. A man trained for decades in controlled combat. A man who built a career around discipline and precision. And he had done it in public. On camera. The weight of that realization pressed down on him. Hard. I didn't know, he said quietly. The older man nodded slightly. I know. That response wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't triumphant. It was understanding. And somehow that made it worse. Because there was no enemy here. No rivalry. Just consequences. The bully looked at his own hands. The same hands he had raised in arrogance minutes ago. Now they felt heavier. Smaller. I thought you were just... He stopped himself. Just what? The older man asked gently. The aggressor didn't answer. Because finishing that sentence would expose exactly who he had become in that moment. Someone who preyed on appearances. Someone who mistook calm for weakness. The older man broke the silence. You don't measure strength by who you can overpower. The crowd leaned in slightly. You measure it by what you choose not to do. That line settled over the market like gravity. Security personnel finally reached the scene, slightly out of breath. Is everything okay here? The older man nodded. It's handled. No demand for revenge. No dramatic accusation, just closure. The bully looked around one last time. The phones were still pointed. The whispers still spreading. But the anger inside him was gone now. Replaced by something unfamiliar. Embarrassment. Reflection. Regret. The older man adjusted his jacket again, ready to leave. But before he turned away, he gave the aggressor one final look. Not threatening. Not superior, just steady. I hope next time, he said quietly, you choose better. And with that, he began walking away. The crowd parted naturally. Not because they were told to, but because presence commands space without demanding it. The bully stood frozen where he was, watching the man he tried to dominate disappear back into the ordinary flow of the market. And for the first time since it started, he understood something. The real danger had never been loud. It had never needed to be. It had been standing calmly in front of him the entire time, and he had completely missed it. The whispers didn't fade. They multiplied. Is that really him? It has to be. I've seen those movements before. The name traveled faster now. Steven Seagal, not shouted, passed quietly, like confirmed truth. The older man had almost reached the edge of the market when two local officers arrived, responding to the calls flooding in. They scanned the scene quickly. One of them looked at the aggressor on the ground. The other looked toward the calm figure walking away. Then recognition hit. His posture changed instantly. "Sir." The officer called respectfully. The older man turned slightly. No arrogance, no performance. Just acknowledgement. The officer approached carefully. "Mr. Seagal, is everything under control?" That was the moment the last bit of denial drained from the bully's face. Not just a rumor. Not just crowd whispers. Confirmed, documented, real. The same man he had shoved, grabbed, and tried to slap was Steven Seagal, martial artist, actor, 7th Dan black belt in Aikido, a man who had trained for decades before ever stepping onto a film set. And he had treated him like an easy target. Steven nodded calmly. "It's handled." The officer glanced at the aggressor. "Do you want to press charges?" The entire crowd leaned in for the answer. This was the moment. The humiliation could become permanent. Legal consequences. Public record. Complete collapse. Steven looked back at the tall man. He wasn't angry. He wasn't triumphant. He simply studied him for a second. Then he shook his head. "No." That single word echoed louder than the takedown. The bully's chest tightened. Because mercy in that moment felt heavier than punishment. The officer hesitated. "Are you sure, sir?" "I'm sure," the crowd murmured, some surprised, some impressed. The aggressor slowly stood up, avoiding eye contact with anyone. His shoulders no longer squared, his chin no longer raised. His entire body language had shifted. Earlier, he had walked through the market like he owned it. Now he looked like he wished he could disappear inside it. Steven stepped a little closer, not threatening, just present. "You don't need to prove anything to strangers," he said quietly. The bully swallowed hard. Those words hit somewhere deeper than pride, because proving himself had been exactly what he was trying to do, with volume, with aggression, with intimidation, and it had backfired publicly. "I didn't know who you were," the bully muttered. Steven's response was immediate. "That's the point." The sentence hung in the air, because respect shouldn't require fame. It shouldn't require recognition. It shouldn't require fear. The officer gave the aggressor a stern look. "You're lucky," he said bluntly. "Very lucky." And that wasn't exaggeration. The video clips were already circulating. People were replaying the moment frame by frame. The precision, the control, the effortlessness. The bully glanced around at the phone, still pointed in his direction. His story had changed forever. Not because he lost a fight, but because he exposed himself. Steven adjusted his jacket one final time, ready to leave for good now. Before turning away, he gave the aggressor one last piece of truth. "Strength is quiet," he said. "Insecurity is loud. No anger, no lecture, just clarity." The bully couldn't respond, because deep down, he knew it was true. Security cleared a path. People stepped aside instinctively, not out of fear, but out of respect. Steven walked through the crowd without looking back. No celebration. No waving, no ego. Just composure. The market slowly returned to life. Music restarted. Vendors resumed calling out prices. But something had changed permanently. Everyone there had witnessed a lesson in real power. Not cinematic power. Not explosive violence. Controlled power. Disciplined power. And the man who had tried to intimidate a stranger had just learned it the hardest way possible. Not through pain, but through exposure. And sometimes, that hurts more. The market slowly returned to normal. Music restarted. Conversations resumed. Footsteps filled the spaces where silence had ruled just minutes before. But something invisible had shifted. Because everyone there knew they hadn't just watched a fight, they had watched a mirror. A reflection of what ego looks like, and what discipline looks like. The tall man remained standing near the center of the walkway long after Steven Seagal disappeared into the crowd. No one mocked him. No one laughed. That would have been easier. Instead, people looked at him with something far heavier. Understanding. Because most people recognized a piece of themselves in that moment. The need to prove something. The urge to dominate when feeling small. The instinct to raise your voice when your pride feels threatened. He replayed everything in his head. The shoulder bump. The first insult. The shove. The grip on the collar. Every warning he ignored. And the calm voice that kept offering him a way out. "I don't want trouble. You can stop. You're stronger than this." Those weren't threats. They were exits. And he had refused every single one. Why? Because walking away felt like losing. But now he understood something painful. Escalating had cost him far more than backing down ever would have. Across the market, a few people were still discussing what they'd seen. Did you notice he never got angry? He never even insulted him back. That's real control, and that was the part that stayed with everyone. It wasn't the takedown. It wasn't the technique. It was the restraint. Real strength doesn't rush to prove itself. It waits, it observes, it gives chances. And when it acts, it does so without emotion. The tall man finally exhaled slowly. For the first time since it began, his breathing felt steady. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't defensive. He was thinking, and thinking can be uncomfortable. Because growth always begins with ego breaking. He looked down at his hands again. The same hands he had used to shove someone he thought was weaker. Now they felt different. Not powerful, just responsible. He could have walked away after the bump. He could have accepted the apology. He could have laughed it off. But he had chosen escalation. And escalation had exposed him. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the crowd, Steven continued walking calmly. No security team around him. No dramatic exit. Just a man blending back into ordinary life. That's what made it powerful. There was no need for applause. No need for recognition. The lesson had already been delivered, and the crowd had witnessed it. A father near the fruit stand quietly told his teenage son, "Remember this. The loudest man isn't always the strongest." The boy nodded slowly, because watching it unfold in real life hits differently than hearing advice. Moments like that stick. They replay. They reshape behavior. The tall man finally began walking too. Not storming, not pushing through people, just walking. Head level, mind quieter. He didn't look for confrontation now. He looked for distance from who he had been 10 minutes earlier. And that's the real consequence. Not bruises, not police reports, transformation. Because sometimes the worst punishment isn't pain, it's realization. Realizing you attacked discipline with ego. Realizing you tried to intimidate someone who didn't need intimidation. Realizing strength doesn't announce itself, it reveals itself only when necessary. The market returned fully to life. But the story would spread, online, offline, through retellings and shared clips. Not as a story about a fight, but as a story about restraint, about composure, about the difference between noise and power. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching this right now needed to see it too. Maybe you've been the calm one under pressure, or maybe you've felt the urge to react when disrespected. The real question is simple. When your ego gets tested, who do you become? The loud one, or the disciplined one? Because respect should never depend on fame. It should never depend on fear. It should be given because someone is human. And real strength, it doesn't humiliate. It doesn't chase attention, it protects. If you believe respect should be given before it's demanded, comment respect. And remember this, the quietest person in the room isn't always weak. Sometimes, he's the one choosing not to show you how strong he really is.